Welcome everyone to the 5th installment of the A&A Legacy Series, in which we get acquainted with the legends, heroes, and icons of the numismatic hobby. I am your host, Barbara Gregory, Editor-in-Chief of the Numismatist magazine. This afternoon, we are very pleased to welcome our special guest, David Sundman, President of Littleton Coin Company, an enduring mail-order firm founded by his father, Maynard, and his mother, Fanny, in the quaint town of Littleton, New Hampshire. The company began in May 1935 as the Maynard Sundman Stamp Company in Connecticut. Maynard married Fanny Casper in April 1941, and 6 months later, he entered the Army, serving 2 years stateside and 2 more overseas, primarily with a military police company in Italy, where he was a clerk in 5th Army General Mark Clark's forward command post. When he left active duty in 1945, he and Fanny moved to Littleton and founded Littleton Stamp Company. By 1949, the company introduced its first numismatic product, World banknotes, to its stamp customers. From there, it branched out to World coins and later United States coins. In 1954, Maynard changed the firm's name to Littleton Stamp and Coin. David Sundman was born in Littleton in 1948, followed by 2 brothers, Rick and Don. At a young age, David sorted through bags of coins searching for better date issues. By the time he was 10, he worked for the company after school and during summer vacations. At Gettysburg College in Pennsylvania, he majored in history, which he had grown to love thanks to his philatelic and numismatic pursuits. Upon graduation in 1970, he worked for a chain of 52 retail clothing stores in and around Baltimore and Washington, D.C. And 2 years later, he left to join the family business. And in 1985, he was appointed president. Today, Littleton Coin Company has 300 full and part-time employees and operates out of an 84,000 square foot building situated on 19 acres. David has been married to Christine for 45 years, and together they raised 3 daughters, Amy, Bethany, and Anna, in this picture book New England community. David has received the A&A's Exemplary Service Award, the Glenn Smedley Memorial Award, and the A&A Medal of Merit, and at this Anaheim convention will be honored as the Harry J. Foreman Dealer of the Year. Welcome, David. We are so pleased you could join us this afternoon.
Thank you very much.
I read at age 5 you were sorting Indian head cents by date when a huge pile of them toppled over onto you. You know, talk about being immersed in the hobby. Did you ever imagine how many coin collectors wished they could be in your shoes? Here it is, your father operated a successful coin business, and you routinely had the opportunity to search through bags of coins from the bank.
Yeah, I remember my brothers and I started out, but we would go to work to tag along with my dad because we wanted to be close to him. And so the routine was that we would go to the dump first, swing by the post office, pick up the mail, and then go to work. And the Indian head cent thing, I remember he had suppliers from New York City that would drive all the way up to New Hampshire and sell him old Indians. And in those days, a bag of Indian head cents had every date. You would even have flying eagles and no 1856s or 77s, but you had every other date. And I remember an illustration of how common 1907s are, is that pile was, I mean, it would be like, 10 times taller than any other date. But it was a lot of fun. It was just great exposure. So that was my earliest experience probably with coins.
If your father had not expanded his business in the late 1940s to include numismatic items, do you think you would have discovered coins on your own?
Probably not. We got into, my father's inspiration for coins was Tatum Stamp and Coin in Springfield, Mass. That's a company that also inspired Cliff Mishler to get into coins. And Tatum was the only stamp dealer who also had a coins on approval business. And my father decided that at some point when he made enough money, he'd branch out into coins. So that's how we got into it. And it came late. In those days, you couldn't go to a bank and say, gee, I want to be a stamp dealer, or I want to be a coin dealer. They wouldn't give you any money. But he went to H.E. Harris, who he admired his retail ads, and he also advertised a stamp dealer kit. And my father answered that ad, and H.E. was at the 1935 FIPEX exhibition in New York City, and my dad made a point of going up to the table at my grandfather's suggestion, he was a salesman selling brass, Bristol Brass Company in Bristol, Connecticut, and introduced himself. He introduced himself to H.E.'s brother, Steve Harris. And Steve was in the marketing department of H.E. Harris and Company. H.E. Harris was the largest stamp wholesaler in the world, and he backed several companies with inventory. He didn't give them money, but Mystic Stamp Company was the first company in 1923 that he backed. My father, over the years, got H.E. to give him credit. And my father saved all his correspondence. His first letter, he'd be writing to H.E. and say, gee, do you think you could get started with $500? And he'd write back and say, yeah, you could start the business with $500. Well, $500, even in 1935, was nowhere near enough money. And every few months, he'd have another letter asking for credit against his inventory. And we had a sole source, one supplier. H.E. Harris sold us all our stamps, basically. And H.E. later in the 40s, when my father got back into business, H.E. got into buying banknotes from all over the world. And stamp collectors and coin collectors would be attracted to the banknotes, and that's how we got into it. So from there, then you started having customers ask, how about coins? So we got into coins, world coins, and there were no suppliers. It was really hard to find anybody. They were very popular once we got them in. And then the foreign coin customers would ask for US coins. So we got around to it. It was a long, slow process. Then the 55 double die came out, and coin collecting became very popular.
We'll talk some more about the 1955 double die here in just a little bit, but after you graduated from college, we mentioned that you worked in retail sales for 2 years. What did you learn that helped you succeed in your business at Littleton, and how and when did you know you would return to the family business?
I was not a great planner or a great communicator. On the steps of after I graduated at Gettysburg College in 1970, my father said, gee, what are you going to do? I said, how about if I come and work for you? And he said, how about if you get some outside experience first? So that was the whole conversation. I went to, my girlfriend, now wife, Chris, was from Silver Spring, Maryland, and so I went down to that area and started pounding on doors, and it seems like whenever you get out of college, it's a tough labor market, but it was really tough then, and I was getting kind of depressed, but I finally found a company that would hire me, and so I got into their like junior executive program or whatever. It was what I learned. That was a family business, and what I learned is how difficult family businesses are. So that was an introduction to working for a family business.
What did you find so challenging about working for a family business?
Well, I don't want to get into the ugly side of it, but Joel probably knows, Joel Horos knows, he's worked with family businesses. The problem with family business is you have to create enough space, and you have to give the kids room. And typically, though, in a family business, you have blurred lines of authority. Everybody thinks it's their responsibility. So I had to learn that, and I didn't really learn that until much later, but reflecting back on it, that was an important thing to try to figure out how to create space in your own business so you're not bumping heads.
You mentioned that you met your wife, Christine, in college, and as a city girl, I understand that she found Littleton a little provincial.
Yeah, we lived in a.
Did she know what she was getting into when she married you?
Well, we swung through Littleton on our brief honeymoon in Canada, but I ran out of money and had to come back to Littleton and ask Dad for a loan so we could make it back to Washington. But so she was a little bit familiar with Littleton, but when we did finally decide, after 2 years of marriage, to move back to Littleton, she was kind of shocked at the lack of sidewalks, and and after dinner, after doing the dishes, we said, well, what are we going to do? And I said, what do you mean? So it's a pretty remote town, but it's a wonderful town to raise a family. It's 6,000 people. We were actually in a little suburban town, Sugar Hill, New Hampshire, and that really is small. It's like 300 people or something. So.
Today, what does Christine and your children think of your career and your hobby?
Well, they're proud of what we have achieved, but I was unsuccessful in recruiting any of the kids. So we have. They all married very smart men, and they're all scattered all over the country. Once in Colorado, once in New Jersey, and once in Kentucky, in Louisville. So,
tagging on to the comment you made about the lines being blurred a little bit in a family company. A year after you were named president of Littleton in 1985, you recommended that the firm sell its philatelic business, Littleton Stamp Company, to Mystic Stamp Company, which is operated by your younger brother Don in Camden, New York. And today, Mystic is the largest mail-order stamp company in the United States. How and why did this decision come about, and how did your family react to that reorganization?
Yeah, it was my recommendation, but they were pretty. Well, it was a tough sell probably to my dad, but there were no struggles over it. My brother Don had quit college at the age of 19 to run Mystic Stamp Company. And we recruited Don to quit college because we had bought the company. It was owned by a friend of ours, Larry Shaver of Camden, New York, and he had started the business in 1923. We bought it in 1973. It was 50 years old. And it was a nice business, but you really needed good management. My brother Don had grown up in our business, and he was an entrepreneur. At the age of 12, he had started his own business selling tropical fish to his schoolmates, borrowed a couple thousand from my dad, and paid him back out of profits. He had his own checkbook. I didn't know any kids at the age of 12 who had their own checking account. He was a very clever guy. I was a stamp buyer in our company. My brother Rick was our coin buyer. I decided that, Don was I had built our catalog, modeled after the H.E. Harris catalog. And I decided my brother Don was doing such a great job, why should we compete with ourselves? So that was like 12 years after we had bought Mystic. And so it made sense that we sold him our inventory and wrote to all our customers and said, gee, you're going to be served by another Sundman. And we didn't lose 2 customers out of thousands and thousands. They really appreciated the family connection and that we were going to take care of them.
That's right. Did your father ever say why he chose to locate his business in Littleton, New Hampshire after his service in World War II?
My father entrusted my mother, while my dad was over in Italy during the war, my mom worked for a very tiny dress shop in Bristol, Connecticut, and Mrs. Cook's dress shop. And they had Bristol was a manufacturing town, and all the top executives in these various manufacturing businesses, their wives would go to Mrs. Cook's dress shop. My mother was the buyer, and she would go to New York and buy outfits for her customers, and she would talk to the buyers and her sources in New York and say, gee, my husband wants to restart the business, the stamp business, somewhere in northern New England. Where should I go? And a lot of them recommended the White Mountains in New Hampshire. So on weekends, my mom would take trips by train, and she ended up in Littleton, New Hampshire in August of 1944, and the Bretton Woods Monetary Conference was going on. There were 18 trains a day going into the Littleton station. It looked like a happening place. So at any rate, she was taken, it was the blackout in the evening in those days in 44, and because of the monetary conference too, added security. She was picked up at the station and went to a little tiny hotel that's still there, Thayer's Hotel, and she didn't see much of the town. She woke up in the morning, went through the front door and saw the big marble and brick post office building right across the street. And my mother was a Sunday school teacher, was quite religious, and she said, God has sent us here, this is the place. My father never saw Littleton until he got off the train in October of 1944. He had so much confidence in my mother's ability that if Littleton was good enough for her, it was good enough for him. So that's how we got there.
That's how you got there.
Yeah, it's my mom.
Obviously, you got a wonderful start in the coin business, working with your dad, and over those many years, you've actually become quite a collector in your own right, and have assembled a good many important collections. In 2013, Stax Bowers Galleries auctioned portions of your personal collection and described you as, quote, a student and connoisseur of rare numismatics. Your hobby interests include ancient Roman and Greek coins, New Hampshire national banknotes, U.S. colonial and U.S. type coins and paper money, and Swedish coins and banknotes, including plate money. What about each captures your interest? And when you discuss the Swedish coins and banknotes, I'd like you to tell us a little bit about your ancestral connection to Sweden.
Sundman is Swedish, and my great-grandfather came over here in May of 1880 and sailed in steerage on the SS Celtic. And I only know that because I had a distant relative in Sweden who tracked us down. He was searching for the long-lost relatives of Axel Wilhelm Sundman. He was writing to all the Sundmans all over the world. And I answered it back, and eventually, after several years, he sent me the entire family tree. He told me the day that my great-grandfather left Liverpool on the ship, and we knew how long it took to cross the Atlantic, about 10 days to cross the Atlantic. So I was at a New York show, international show, and I had a little extra time, so I went to the New York Public Library and looked through all the microfilm passenger manifests of all the ships. At that point, I didn't know the ship. I just knew that what day he'd left Liverpool, and I found his name on the manifest, which was pretty exciting. So that's the ancestral connection. And eventually, I went back there and took my family back, and we retraced my great-grandfather's steps. But I thought my first, I think, real piece that I owned is really the prize of the collection. It's an $8 1659 piece of Swedish plate money, and there's about 100 that exist in the world. Most of them are in Sweden, and I bought it from Jonathan Kern, and it was, I mean, it's like 32 pounds. I mean, it's just wonderful, and I've got it on display in my office. So that was, I find coin collecting to be very tactile, and I like raw coins most of the time, and when you hold something that's 32 pounds, it gets your attention. So then after that, I decided, well, I'll put together a typeset. So I've got, $8, $4, $2, and then I have duplicates, of course, and so I switch them out from time to time, and it's just a lot of fun. I think a lot of the stuff is so scarce. If something's so rare that you never get to see it, like New England currency, New England shillings and whatever, Massachusetts Bay, it's not as interesting. But when there's a mass of it, like the Ford collection is what got me going with that. Because now you had this wonderful presentation all in one place. And before that, there'd been several other good collections, the Hain collection, that had sold in recent years. But probably at the time I didn't have the money. So at that point I had a little bit of money. Mm-hmm. You have to collect in this business, you have to get the permission of your spouse to obviously to spend the time, well, time and money. You gotta have both, so. And
I'm assuming that idea that you can actually hold something in your hand is what was appealing about the ancient coins as well. Why you enjoyed collecting them.
Yeah, I have two in my pocket.
You do?
Here's, I bought one today. This is a denarii of Mark Antony. But it's just fascinating. I mean, what is it, 42 BC? It's just great. And I have a Swedish coin. I've never seen one of these. Johann III, 1568 to 92, 4 mark. Wow. But it's just great stuff. My problem is I like everything, but you only have so much.
And obviously the interest is still alive, and you're still pursuing and adding.
I'll sell a collection. I'll start a new collection. I know John Adams does that as well. Mm-hmm.
And obviously, the fact that you collect New Hampshire national banknotes, it has to do with obviously growing up in New Hampshire, and
probably more to do with Dave Bauer's influence. He called me up and said, "Gee, I'd like to start writing a book on New Hampshire national banknotes." And it kind of grew out of that. I had a couple at that point. Yeah.
Well, you researched and assembled and sold a collection of Massachusetts silver coins that was described by the auctioneer as the finest of the fine, the rarest of the rare. In fact, the cataloger wrote that, quote, "No equivalent group of basic Massachusetts silver types will be offered again in our lifetime." What drove you to assemble a collection like this?
Well, one was finally availability. The provenance of the individual coins, that's important when you do that. And the other thing is that New Hampshire and Massachusetts shared the same royal governor at that point in history. So those coins also circulated in southern New Hampshire in the Portsmouth, Exeter area. And so I could, the New Hampshire connection was part of it. Yeah.
How long did it take you to assemble that selection
probably
of Massachusetts silver?
I mean, I got a lot out of the Ford sale. Probably, maybe I did it over 10 years.
You also are a collector of books as well, and your vast collection of hobby-related references has been described as one of the finest private numismatic libraries in America. Just how large is it, and how do you use it on a daily, weekly basis, both personally and professionally?
Well, it's probably an exaggeration to say it's one of the finest, but it's a good, I'd say it's a good collection. It's about probably linear feet. It's 675 feet, but there are duplicates in there too. But when we built our building, when you walk in the lobby, you'll see this wonderful projection of wood, like part of a wooden arc coming down into the lobby area. And the architect, because I made such a big point about how important knowledge is in numismatics, he wanted to enshrine the library in like a wooden arc. So it like extends through the building in my office and everything, and knowledge is really, really, really important. And a lot of our discoveries when we found things from collections and helping the owners of the collections, we've been able to research it through our library. So we continually add to it. And what's marvelous is that with the numismatic portal and other efforts to digitize things, it's easier for me to use my library using the web. And then I can pull down I might have the actual physical book, but I can find, it's searchable once it's digitized, so it's, it's much faster.
David, you mentioned the 1955 double die cent, and you were a youngster when that was discovered. Did you get caught up in all the excitement that surrounded it? And did you ever find or otherwise acquire an example?
I never found one. Most of the time we were selling coin and stamp offers for small amounts of money. So we had a lot of stamp offers that were 10-cent offers. So my father would get tons and tons of dimes, and every night after school, there was a little machine that's plastic called a Scan-O-Matic. I don't know if any of you are familiar. We dumped the coins in, you move the thing back and forth, and had a magnifier, and you'd look at the coin. And it was great. We would, after school, or after dinner, we would clean the dishes, and then we'd bring out the coins, and Dad would go to the bank and get quarters and nickels and halves. We weren't normally looking at pennies. But it was just great fun. We found a lot of good dates, and it was all inventory, and Dad would give us 10% of Red Book for whatever we found. So there was incentive. So we found a 1921 Merc dime. It was like a $5 Red Book item at that point. So we got 50 cents. So that was 5 comic books. So we were great comic book collectors too.
Tell us about your first experience with the rare, undated Washington-born Virginia token. When, where, and how did you come in contact with it? And what did you learn from the experience?
My father would buy tokens and boxes of mixed coins for like a quarter-cent each, or half a penny each, from New York dealers. And I was rooting through, as a kid, maybe I was 8 or 9, I was rooting through a box of these things, and I had read the Red Book, and I didn't memorize it, but I picked up this one coin, and it had George Washington on it, and I recognized it, and it was a Washington-born Virginia, undated, 1792 copper. And at the time, it was $50 in the guidebook. So it was a major find. It really impressed on me, again, knowledge is power, and you got to have a good library. So that was it. It was exciting. We kept it for years, and it kept going up, and eventually we sold it. I've since replaced it in my own collection with a nice example, but it's one of my favorite coins.
Why is it one of your favorite coins?
Because I found it.
Because you found it. Wonderful. Okay.
And I was sad that we sold it. I wanted to replace it.
Many folks these days enjoy watching the faces of people on the popular PBS series Antiques Roadshow, especially when they learn that the pottery, jewelry, or furniture that they bought or inherited is worth a small fortune. Like many dealers and collectors, you likely have helped more than one person understand the value of a collectible in his or her possession. Can you share some stories with us?
The greatest story that I was associated with is a lady and her husband brought in a small group of about 40 pieces of U.S. paper type, large size type, and into our building, and we had a buyer who looked at it and said, well, this group here, we'd be willing to pay you $5,000 for it, but this one note is, I'm not familiar with it, and I have to go get my boss, Jim Reardon, to look at it. And Jim came in and looked at the note and said to the couple, we're not going to make you an offer because whatever we told you, you'd accept. And it wouldn't be fair to you. And what it was a $20 gold note. There was, at the time, 5 known. So we helped them, we handled it like a house. We put it at an auction, we put it in a Lynn Knight auction. And I don't have the exact number, but I believe it sold for around $200,000. Mm-hmm. And we worked on a small percentage. And they had received offers of under $2,000 for the whole deal from several other people, but the guy was a banker. He thought that, gee, it's got to be worth more than this. He went to his mother in Hanover, New Hampshire, and said, gee, who would you go to in northern New Hampshire if you had something of value in the paper money field? And the lady said, well, I'd take it to Maynard Sundman, my dad. So that's how they found us. And Don Perlman was doing some consulting for us, and I told him the story, and he released that to Associated Press, that story, and a lady in California saw the story and called me up and said, gee, I've got a note that my grandfather owned, and it was passed through the family since the Civil War. And it was, she said, it's the first $5 bill. And I said, well, send me a picture, send me a fax. She sent me a fax, and I couldn't really make heads or tail other than it was a $5 national banknote, 1860 time period, 1863. And I called her up and I said, gee, the only way I can really help you is if you send it to me. I sent her a FedEx box, she shipped it to me, and it turned out to be the first national banknote ever issued. That was sold in the same sale, but it came in because of this other great story. So it was just a lot of fun to be associated, and that also sold for like 200 grand.
Wonderful.
And it was the most exciting thing, and it happened bang, 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 you know. It was the same year, the same sale.
David, you're a life member of the ANA and a fellow of the American Numismatic Society. You're a contributor to a guidebook of United States coins and co-author with Q. David Bowers of the 100 Greatest American Currency Notes. In your spare time, you collect vintage books as well as photos of New Hampshire's White Mountains, and you've amassed a collection of 500 or more stereoscopic views. You also ski, golf, play tennis, and walk. When do you have a moment to catch your breath, and much less run a $70 million business?
Obviously, it takes a lot of people. We have a wonderful organization. My father, one of the things he really learned from the Army was his Army experience was organization, and he studied business organization in his spare time. And we had a small business that we bought, Executive Development Press, and we sold management books, and we sold to companies like Disney and IBM and everybody. And we had one author who we had bought the business from him. But and we always experimented with new management techniques in our business, and it really has paid off. I mean, it takes, we're sending out 20,000 orders a week, so that's 1 million orders a year. And in our, and there's a lot of pieces in each order. It's a lot to manage, and we've been really good at growing an organization in a small part of the world. You know, it's 6,000 people. We draw on a much larger area, but that's the key is building a team. So you can do so much more when you build one. Mm-hmm. So that's the secret to our success. It's other people.
Right. As you've mentioned, Littleton, New Hampshire has about 6,000 people there, and you are the second largest employer in town. You've been active in your community. You've served on the Littleton Planning Board, the Public Libraries Board of Trustees, the New Hampshire Public Broadcasting System Board of Governors, and the New Hampshire Historical Society Board of Trustees, and finally, as a trustee of the trust funds for the town of Littleton. You're a native son of Littleton. Mm-hmm. Have you ever thought about moving your operation somewhere else?
No. Well, and it's because, I mean, we're you don't think about it. My father and mother really get the credit. It's so hard to start a business and survive. It's a much different job taking over a business, you know, that's already going. We're important to the community, and you know, we want to stay there, and it's been good to us. And we were about to move out of town in one sense to an adjacent town because we couldn't build a building big enough on the land that we could find, and the town voted to sell us a portion of land, well, to the Littleton Industrial Park, who then turned around and sold it to us. And it was, if you ever heard of how contentious a New England town meeting can be, it's amazing. This thing passed unanimously, which means that the town really had a lot of confidence in us, and it's been great. They've been a wonderful town and very supportive.
Wonderful. Do you ever worry that your company might be a bit old-fashioned in its approach to numismatics? For example, you sell items to beginning collectors through the mail, but you also pride yourself in serving an ever-expanding client base. Your focus is collectors, not investors. In today's world, do you still believe in your father's underlying business philosophy?
Well, his underlying philosophy was to try new things, and so we're continually experiment. We let our customers lead us, and so we're always adding new items to our product line, and we take our customers as far. We give them individual attention. We take them as far as they want to go in numismatics, and we haven't really branched outside of that. Obviously, we understand the stamp business, but I don't feel like competing with my smart brother. So,
you have received a number of accolades from the ANA, including a Presidential Award, the Glenn Smedley Memorial Award, and an ANA Medal of Merit, as well as the Exemplary Service Award, for supporting the association's educational and promotional efforts. You are a frequent speaker at ANA conventions, and you also underwrite this event, the Maynard Sundman Littleton Coin Company Lecture Series. Why so much effort on behalf of the association and the hobby? Obviously, the motivating force must be more than just the recognition you receive for doing this.
I actually haven't thought about an answer to this question. Well, I think the ANA is a really great organization, and we want to be a good partner. So that's really, that's really the motivation. I mean, that's really it.
Do you think that some of the beginning collectors who might order some of your introductory sets through Littleton, do you think you've been instrumental in perhaps turning them into more serious collectors?
Well, I know that. If you walked around the Bourse floor, also a lot of the dealers, they answered our ads when we were when they were kids, and either stamps or coins. Some did both, and we created a lot of collectors. But we don't just deal with kids. We deal with kids in the sense that they're new collectors. So I consider a kid, a 70-year-old, a kid, if coin collecting is new to him or her. So it's a really fun business. The customers are great, the dealers are great, and the product is wonderful. So,
in a 2008 biography of you released by your company, you noted that, quote, "Every year there is more competition for entertainment, and people have only so much time," unquote. 8 years ago, you believed you supported collectors by working hard in your business, adding that customers spending time with your staff can be certain that every transaction will be satisfying. How do you see things today, 8 years later? Is the numismatic environment better or worse or about the same?
The business environment, and I can talk to that. It's tougher now. I mean, after everybody knows that it's a much more difficult environment. But I think we've been through a lot in 70 plus years of business. There have been downturns in the business, and I mean nationally, just speaking, nationally we're at a period where the Fed is, I think, the only ones doing their job. But this is a great country, and I see lots of opportunity in the future. The U.S. Mint is a wonderful, they do a wonderful job with their products, and they're a partner in a sense that most of what we're selling is something that was struck by the U.S. Mint,
Is there anything that you think that the hobby community could do better to promote the hobby, to get more people interested in the hobby?
I do think that, I mean, this is a very technical field with lots of niche areas. I think if you're going to get new people, you really have to simplify the process. And just as Apple Computer made the PC, you know, when they developed a prototype for that, they created something and asked people to react to it. They made it computing very simple, and you have to do that. I was looking at I didn't go to this slideshow that Dave Bowers did on early U.S. metals, but it was reproduced in the MCA publication, and it's really like the top 50 early metals in the U.S., and that becomes a checklist for people who want to get into metal collecting, and I think you got to do things like that.
Along the same lines, is there anything that the ANA could do better?
There probably are, but I would claim not to be an expert at that. I might have an opinion, but I don't. I'm not aware enough in tune to offer good feedback on that.
Perhaps it could pick up on the what you were discussing about the hobby community, as long as the ANA provides the tools to make learning easier and more accessible.
I think that they could do. They could probably make it easier for dealers to participate in getting new members. Over the years, I've worked at times trying to help the ANA in that regard, and I think this year we got 128 new members, but there's probably more dealers could do to. I think if we can make the hobby bigger, everybody benefits. Right. It's not. It's a win-win-win thing. So we're in competition for people's minds. There's so many more activities out there.
That's right.
We got Pokemon.
David, you've said that, like so many in this hobby, that you love coins and banknotes. In addition, you state that to be good at something, you have to enjoy it. Unless you are enthusiastic, you said, you cannot convince good people to work for you. Unless you like what you do, you won't take a long-term view. So David, what is your long-term view, and what do you envision for the future of the hobby and the ANA?
It's not clear sailing, but I see in our own business that there is a slow improvement in terms of our ability to attract and keep hobbyists. So, I'd like to think that we'll get, things will start growing again, and I'm pretty optimistic by nature.
And your father, Maynard, often expressed the belief that, quote, no one ever succeeds alone. So David, do you agree with that? And who would you say has been most instrumental in your own success?
Oh, my mother and father,
Right.
I'd say. And I got a lot of help from my brothers, and I've got I've got a good partner, Ed Hennessy, who's helped us over the years and continues to do so.
Well, David, I have one final question for you. In numismatics and in life, what would you like your legacy to be?
I guess I'd like to be remembered as someone who's fair and square.
Wonderful.
That's it.
Well, David, thank you very much, and thank you all for participating in this 5th ANA Legacy Series. So again, thank you all for coming, and we'll see you next time. David, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.